I'm sorry, I just need a moment. I'll be fine. She said it to no one in particular. One hand pressed flat against the pharmacy counter, the other still holding the prescription slip. The fluorescent light above her was the kind that hums just loudly enough to notice when everything else goes quiet. Sarah Finch was 25 years old and had been standing at that counter for 4 minutes trying to make the numbers work in her head. The cost of the antibiotics, the rent due Friday, the fabric order she hadn't been able to fill this week because her hands had been shaking too badly to cut a straight line. The pharmacist looked at her with the particular patience of someone who had seen this exact moment many times before and never fully gotten used to. It's $214, hon. With the discount card, it's $168. $168. She had $93 in her checking account. She knew this without checking. Is there a generic? This is the generic. She nodded slowly, folded the prescription slip, began to put it back in her bag with the careful movements of someone managing not to cry in public, which is one of the quieter forms of dignity. Put it on mine. The voice came from behind her, calm, unhurried, the way people speak when they're not asking for anything back. She turned. A man stood 2 places back in the line. 33, maybe. Dark coat, no tie. He was looking at the pharmacist, not at her, which somehow made it easier to hear. "Sir, I can't let you do that," Sarah said. He looked at her then. "You're not letting me. I'm just paying." A pause. "You can argue with me after you have your medicine." His name was Calloway Drum. He came to the pharmacy on the 3rd Thursday of every month, a prescription of his own. Nothing dramatic, maintenance medication for a condition he managed with the same practical efficiency he brought to everything else. He was not by nature an impulsive person, but he had watched her face while she was doing the math, and something in the particular stillness of it, the way she'd gone very quiet and very contained, had moved something in him that efficiency didn't govern. He paid. She accepted it with a thank you that cost her something to say, he could tell. He did not make it worse by being gracious about it. Outside the pharmacy, she stopped him on the sidewalk. "I want to pay you back," she said. "I mean that." "Okay," he said simply. "Not don't worry about it. Not it was nothing. Just okay," which respected her enough to take it seriously. She gave him the only card she had, a small cream-colored rectangle with a hand-sewn buttonhole detail on the corner. Her name printed simply, Sarah Finch. Alterations and custom tailoring. He looked at it for a moment, then put it in his coat pocket. Sarah had run her small tailoring business from a rented room off Aldgate Street for 2 years. She did alterations mostly. Wedding dresses, interview suits, hems and repairs for people who cared for their clothes the way you care for things you can't easily replace. She was precise and patient and had a gift for understanding what a garment was supposed to feel like on a body, which is a different thing from knowing measurements. She had been sick for 3 weeks with a respiratory infection that she'd initially tried to manage with rest and over-the-counter remedies, because the doctor visit itself had already cost her money she didn't have. By the time she'd finally gone in, the infection had deepened enough to require a course of antibiotics she now, thanks to a stranger, actually had. She went home, took the first dose, and sat at her sewing table without sewing. Just sat, in the particular stillness of someone who is tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. She thought about the man's voice. The way he'd said you can argue with me after. The way he hadn't looked at her with pity, just with a kind of level, unhurried attention that she hadn't encountered very often and couldn't quite categorize. He came to her shop 12 days later. Not to collect, to bring a jacket. Good wool, well-made, with a lining that had separated at the shoulder seam in a way that would be invisible to most people and obvious to anyone who knew what they were looking at. "I figured you could fix this," he said. "If you're feeling better." She was, mostly. She took the jacket and examined the seam with the focused attention she gave everything she handled. 2 days, she said. "It'll hold properly this time," he nodded. "What do I owe you?" $168, she said without looking up. He was quiet for a moment. Then quietly, "Fair." She looked up then, and something passed between them that was not romantic and not transactional, just human. The particular warmth of two people who have recognized something, true in each other without needing to name it. What Sarah did, not know what she had no reason to know, was that Callaway Drum was the principal owner of Drum Health Partners, which had acquired Meridian General Hospital 14 months prior and two smaller outpatient clinics in the same network. He was not a doctor. He was the person who decided whether hospitals had the resources to function as hospitals, the budgets, the staffing ratios, the equipment replacement cycles. He had come into healthcare not from medicine, but from a deep-seated conviction, formed during his mother's long illness a decade ago, that the system's failures were largely organizational and that organizational failures could be fixed by people willing to do the unglamorous work of fixing them. He was recognized in boardrooms. He was not, in his regular coat and practical shoes, particularly recognizable in pharmacies. When his director of community outreach presented him, 3 weeks after the pharmacy visit, with a report on gaps in prescription affordability affecting low-income patients in the hospital's service area, the numbers were significant and the solutions were not complicated. Just unfunded, he approved the budget for a prescription assistance program the same afternoon. He did not tell anyone what had moved him to read that particular report so carefully on that particular day. He just approved it. Sarah brought the jacket back in 2 days, as promised. The lining was seamless. He turned it inside out and examined the work with genuine attention. "This is better than the original," he said. "The original was rushed," she said. "Good fabric, careless execution. Happens when people are busy." He put the jacket on. It settled correctly across his shoulders for what he suspected was the first time since he'd bought it. He looked at her. Across the counter of her small shop, the spools of thread organized by color along the wall. The dressmaker's form in the corner wearing something half-finished in pale blue. The afternoon light coming through the single window at an angle that made everything look considered. "How long have you been doing this?" he asked. "Since I was 14. My grandmother taught me." A pause. She said, "A good tailor doesn't just fix what's broken. They understand what the thing was supposed to be." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Someone told me something like that once. About a different kind of work." She tilted her head. "What kind?" "Healthcare," he said, and left it there simply. She didn't ask more. She was a person who understood that some things are offered in the amount they're meant to be offered, and that pressing for more can ruin the shape of something. The prescription assistance program launched quietly 4 months later, embedded in the hospital's outpatient services. Within its first year, it served over 300 patients in the surrounding neighborhoods, covering medication costs for people who had been making the same calculations Sarah had made at that pharmacy counter, every month indefinitely. Sarah never knew about it directly, but she went back to Meridian General the following winter for a follow-up appointment. And the pharmacist there, a different one, in the hospital's own pharmacy, told her about a new program that would cover her prescription at no cost. She stood at that counter and felt something she couldn't name precisely, a warmth with weight to it, like being held by something larger than herself without knowing whose arms they were. She thought briefly about a man in a dark coat who had said, "You can argue with me after." She smiled, picked up her medicine, walked out into the afternoon, which was cold and clear and full of a light that made the ordinary street look, for a moment, like somewhere worth being. She had been a stranger at a counter, trying to make numbers work that wouldn't work. He had simply paid, not for recognition, not for return, just because she was there and he could. And that one quiet act had moved something that kept moving long after both of them had walked away. Kindness doesn't stop where the moment ends. It travels further than we ever know. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Let's spread more stories of kindness and hope together.